I'll put that in there so when I die a month from now, it'll be the Fassbender thing from room 666, and you can play some really ominous, low music. It'll be my last appearance.
Go.
He's Ethan Hawke.
He's Richard Linklater, otherwise known as Herbie Fabatz, but not a lot of people know that.
Richard Linklater is one of the most interesting and underrated film directors working today. Even when one of his films doesn't turn out so great, there is always at least something to appreciate about it. He's a primarily indie filmmaker whose style is often described as laid-back and naturalistic.
Rick is not looking through Hollywood's eyes. He doesn't care how Hollywood sees him. It's a valuable tool. He loves Hollywood. He doesn't need anybody else to make his dreams come true.
Many of his films focus on the experiences of growing up, and many of his films play with the concept of time in innovative and experimental ways. Even outside of his work, Linklater is often described as a very humble and laid-back person. He's kinda like if George Harrison was a film director, a super chill and creative guy who's just impossible not to love.
I'll jump on board sooner than with any other director, trusting that we'll go create something that I'll have an experience in a movie with him directing that I want to be in.
Richard Linklater is also recognizable for his way of capturing this little place known as Texas. In some ways, Richard Linklater is to Texas what Martin Scorsese is to New York, or what Paul Thomas Anderson is to California. So with 2 projects currently in the works and one that's technically already out, it just hasn't gotten a wide release yet, I thought now would be a perfect time to take a deep dive into the filmography of this eclectic filmmaker. Now, for me, the best way to approach an artist's work is by looking at the work itself. So I watched a handful of Richard Linklater's most acclaimed and well-known movies. I'll provide my thoughts, my opinions, and my analysis on each film. Let's begin. Slacker is far from a perfect movie, but it's definitely a solid directorial debut. After all, filmmakers have to start somewhere. It's just a film where a bunch of buddies got together and essentially said, fuck it, let's make a movie together, so it has a certain low-budget charm despite being rough around the edges. Now, when I say low budget, I mean it. The film had a budget of $23,000, which may sound like a lot until you realize that most indie A24 films have budgets of over $1 million. The film has a very unique structure, and it doesn't really have a protagonist either. The film will follow one random character for about 5 minutes until intersecting with a different character, then the film will follow that character for about 5 minutes until moving to a different character, then the film will follow them, and you get the idea. The film was a huge inspiration for many up-and-coming indie filmmakers, proving that you don't need tons of money to make a solid movie. Like I said, it's pretty rough around the edges, like there's a part in the movie where you can literally see the boom mic. However, it's still a decent experience.
Smoking that Whoopi Goldberg South Egyptian Fur Burger Deluxe Mega Million Scratcher Skunk Bubba Kush. We smoking Dung Beetle. I'm on 12 Vicodins smoking on Scooby-Doo Dick.
Dazed and Confused is just fun. Despite being Richard Linklater's first studio film, it still had a relatively tight budget of $6.9 million. It's a very simple film, and it doesn't have much of a story, but that's also what makes it charming. It's a blend between a really funny stoner comedy and a very endearing coming-of-age film. Although I've never done weed before, and I don't really plan on doing it anytime soon, I imagine this film captures the vibe of being blazed out of your mind to the point where you can't even think straight pretty accurately. The film captures the 70s time period in a glorious way, especially with the film's incredible classic rock soundtrack. The characters are all memorable and each cast member plays their role perfectly. It was the film that brought Matthew McConaughey's name into the spotlight, and for good reason. Like, even people who haven't seen the movie know the phrase, alright, alright, alright. I don't know if that was a good impression, it probably wasn't. The dialogue is very naturalistic and engaging, as usual for Richard Linklater. It's not a life-changing piece of cinema, but it does its job by just being a really entertaining and fun little hangout flick. Before Sunrise is the first film in Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. I'll say it right now, the Before trilogy is Linklater's masterpiece. It's a trilogy about a relationship evolving over time, with the first film releasing in 1995, the second in 2004, and the third in 2013. This first installment in particular is a beautiful and charming movie. Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy both give excellent performances in this movie. They sink into their characters in a remarkable way, and the chemistry between the two is marvelous.
I always kind of wanted to do a movie. Whenever you're doing a big, complicated thing, you always say, I really wish I was doing a film about, a guy and a girl talking to each other. And then this one kind of came about, and then I realized kind of what a terrifying aspect that was, and figured you only get that kind of opportunity every blue moon. So we took it.
The cinematography is filled with impressive yet subtle long takes. However, my favorite part about the movie is the writing. The dialogue feels incredibly naturalistic. The characters are very easy to love and empathize with. The movie depicts an almost dreamlike young adult love story, with the two main characters trying to grasp and come to terms with the future ahead of them. Also, the movie explores its themes of love and self-fulfillment in a really thoughtful way. Not only is it a film about love, but it's also a film about choice and reconciling with the many choices that life throws your way. It's not a complicated movie, but that's also what makes it so special. The movie shines through its simplicity, honesty, naturalism, and heart. This is an incredible indie romance film that I'd highly recommend watching if you haven't already.
Flanders, you gotta help me.
Well, sure, buddy. I'd be happy to help out. What can I do? Doodly doo, diddly doodly diddly doodly, hobbly hoodly, hobbly hoodly, hobbly gobble 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 gabba gabba,
Waking Life is amazing. First of all, this movie is fucking weird and I love it. The film tackles this strange concept with such confidence, which makes for a unique and overwhelming experience. It follows a very similar story structure to Slacker, but executed in a much more surreal fashion. The film also explores many fascinating and thought-provoking philosophies over the course of the movie. It's definitely one of those movies where a rewatch feels almost necessary in order to fully grasp everything this movie throws at you. Although there were some parts of the movie that flew over my head on a first viewing, I was still able to enjoy this film a lot. The dialogue flows in such a natural and engaging way, as usual for Richard Linklater, and the film still manages to have an enjoyable sense of humor. The rotoscoped animation really adds to the film's surrealist and dreamlike nature as well. If you don't know what rotoscoping is, it's essentially a process where someone would film live-action footage and then animate over it. Many Disney films back in the day used this technique, often used to make the animation look smoother and more natural. The animation technique is utilized in Waking Life in such a creative and stylized way. It almost makes you feel like you're floating through a Pablo Picasso or a Henri Matisse painting. The film isn't perfect, but it's easily Richard Linklater's weirdest and most experimental film. It's a strange yet amazing movie that I'd recommend watching if you haven't already. My biggest concern going into School of Rock was, I'm going to find this cheesy, aren't I? Although the film does have some cheesy elements, it's overall a really funny and charming movie. The star of the show here is Jack Black. I'm probably the last person on earth to say this, but this was the role Jack Black was born to play. Even though people poke fun at him sometimes, when given the right role, Jack Black can have the screen presence and charisma of a fireball.
A lot of directors and writers that are starting out a project are actually just looking for good puppets. They're looking for good cattle that will speak the words as they wrote them and won't give them any guff or any friction or any and he talked back, and he's the opposite. He's looking for people with ideas that are fresh.
All the other characters are endearing too. Another thing I was concerned about going into this movie was, what if the child characters are super annoying? But no, all the child characters and child performances are really damn solid. It's a movie that not only serves as a love letter to rock music, but also encourages future generations to pursue their passions in life. This movie also does the whole liar revealed plotline, which is a very difficult trope to pull off without seeming forced. Luckily, I think this movie pulled that plotline off well, and it leads to probably the funniest liar revealed scene I've ever seen in a movie. Anyways, this is just a really enjoyable and delightful little movie. Before Sunset is my favorite of the Before trilogy, and is also my favorite Richard Linklater film.
People would ask, like, well, did they see each other again 6 months later? But no one said, are you going to do a sequel? There were 3 people in the world who maybe wanted a sequel to that. And that was Julie and Ethan and I.
Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy both give fantastic and naturalistic performances in this movie. The chemistry between Jesse and Celine is believable and easy to get wrapped into. The cinematography is filled with impressive yet subtle long takes. But of course, the standout of this movie is the writing. Every line of dialogue is engaging and thoughtful. The story of this movie plays out in real time, and I find that structure brilliant. You can almost feel every second tick by, and it's truly powerful to see the 2 leads grasp onto each moment they have left together. The concept of time plays a huge role in this movie thematically as well. It's breathtaking to hear Jesse and Celine talk about how much has changed since last seeing each other. Both Before Sunrise and Before Sunset look at a relationship that could have been, but they look at it in very different ways. Before Sunrise is a longing for the future, while Before Sunset is a longing for the past. Also, the ending of this movie, just stunning. Overall, this movie is a masterpiece. A Scanner Darkly is a trippy-ass movie. The concept is interesting and is explored in a very intriguing way, which is to be expected for an adaptation of a Philip K. Dick novel. The rotoscoped animation is wonderfully stylized and gives the film such a dreamlike look. The thing I love about Richard Linklater's animated movies is that he always uses the animation medium to his advantage. In A Scanner Darkly in particular, he is able to tell a sci-fi story while still staying true to his indie filmmaking roots. It's also a film that just simply wouldn't work as well in live action, mainly through the technology that the film introduces called a scramble suit. The performances from Keanu Reeves, Robert Downey Jr., and Woody Harrelson are all fantastic. Also, in classic Richard Linklater fashion, this film has a very enjoyable sense of humor and very naturalistic dialogue. It's an amazing movie, go watch it.
Jelly, you take care of Grandpa.
Okay.
No, don't shoot Grandpa, just literally take care of him.
Bernie is just a fun movie. It's a really interesting blend between a biopic and a documentary. Much of the movie recounts the real-life events surrounding Bernie Tiede, a nice man who warmed the hearts of many in his community and also accidentally killed an old lady. However, the film also splices in interviews of real townsfolk discussing the situation. It's a very morbid story, but it still manages to have a funny and twisted sense of humor. Much of the humor comes from Jack Black's charismatic performance as this bizarre little man. However, the interviews have some funny moments too. Much of the people being interviewed have eccentric personalities and just say some weird shit at times, which makes for some confusing yet strangely comedic moments. It's not the most mind-blowing film out there, but it's a good time. Go check it out if you're interested. Before Midnight is the final installment of the Before trilogy, and what a way to end the series.
We always joked it's the lowest grossing film to ever spawn a sequel. But after doing a second one, it just invites that question. So the pressure the third time was very different. That there was anticipation and everybody was already asking about it.
Although it's not as good as Before Sunrise or Before Sunset, this film is still incredible. This film has moments that are harsh and heartbreaking, but it also has moments that are hopeful and sweet. It's interesting and unique to see a movie that looks at life after the romance rather than the blossoming of a romance, which is what the first 2 movies in the trilogy focus on.
This feels a lot like life. You know, you're kind of in the middle section. Is it as interesting? It's not what people make films about. You do the beginnings of relationships and the end. No one does the in-between, and for good reason, because there's less there usually that's interesting. So it was by far the most challenging, and to dig into that age and to that place in a relationship.
The last 20 minutes of the movie in particular are just brutal. You feel like a fly on the wall, unable to do anything about the conflict unfolding before your eyes. It's a harrowing but honest look into the complications that many couples have to deal with in this stage of a relationship. The entire trilogy is just a beautiful work of art. A trilogy with believable performances, lovable characters, an endearing romance, naturalistic dialogue, engaging writing, and impressive camera work. An honest and breathtaking portrait of love that I'm sure will only grow more meaningful to me the older I get. So my takes and opinions have been pretty lukewarm so far, I will admit. I mean, I'm sure a few people will disagree with some things I've stated so far, but I wouldn't classify any of those opinions as unpopular necessarily. Until now. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Boyhood, to be honest. Now, before you get mad, let me explain. I love the concept of this movie. It's a coming-of-age film shot over 12 years to show the characters literally growing up. It's another instance of Richard Linklater using the concept of time to create something super unique. The fact that the film was even made at all is an achievement in and of itself. However, the actual contents of the film fail to live up to the film's concept. The film only skims the surface of what it's like to grow up, which just reeks of missed potential. The film has some funny moments, some sad moments, and some relatable moments. However, I don't think there's enough of them, especially when you consider the film's nearly 3-hour runtime. I know some argue that's the point of the movie, not a lot happens because it's just like real life, but I disagree with that.
Nothing happens in the world? Are you out of your fucking mind?
I enjoyed the first half of the film, but as it went on, it just got more and more uninteresting to me, with the exception of a really powerful monologue delivered by Patricia Arquette near the end of the film. If you love this movie, that's totally cool. Personally, I think it's a decent film that could have been better. Everybody Wants Some is very similar to Dazed and Confused. Both films are titled after classic rock songs, both are stoner comedy films, both focus on a group of people in school trying to figure their lives out, and both take place during a very brief period of time. However, this film isn't nearly as interesting or memorable as Dazed and Confused. I wish the film had more of a nuanced look at becoming a college student, and I wish the female characters weren't so poorly written. However, the quirky characters and the enjoyable 70s aesthetic make the film a solid enough experience in my eyes. It's far from the best in Richard Linklater's catalog, but it's still a decent time.
Did you arrive safely on the moon? Over.
Bugs to ice. Yeah, I'm on the moon. Over.
Have you prepared a statement for the press?
Well, yes, I have prepared a statement. Get me out of here!
Apollo 10.5: A Space Age Childhood is the third animated film by Richard Linklater, and although it isn't as good as the previous two, it's still pretty damn good. The characters are all charming, Jack Black is charismatic as the narrator, the movie has a funny sense of humor as usual for Linklater, the music is great and really fits the time period and tone the movie was going for. Honestly, the film's nostalgic tone and the late 60s time period are what make this film such a treat to watch. The film's plot is about a kid going into space on a private mission as a test run after NASA accidentally builds the rocket too small. However, the film doesn't spend too much time on the plot and instead focuses on the slice-of-life moments and the pop culture of the time. In a lesser film, this type of meandering could get annoying, and yeah, there are a few moments where it focuses too heavily on it. However, Richard Linklater clearly knows how to do these types of story structures well, and this film is no exception. It's extremely impressive that this movie got me nostalgic for a time period I wasn't even alive during. How is that even possible, and how does that even work? The film's portrait of Texas during the 1960s is also pretty nuanced, as the film showcases both the fun and the not-so-fun aspects of that time period. Overall, it's a very well-made movie, and I'd recommend watching it. Hitman is the latest film from Richard Linklater, and it's very solid. The film follows the real-life story of Gary Johnson, a man that would pretend to be a hitman to essentially catfish people, but like in a good way. That sounds very wrong, let me rephrase that. Basically, Gary would be hired by an idiot to kill someone. Gary would meet up with the idiot in person, often playing a goofy character just to fuck with them. Then Gary would reveal that he isn't a hitman, authorities would be called, and the idiot is sent to jail, realizing that they're a complete idiot for falling for this. Obviously, that story is already fucking hilarious, and this movie dives into that hilarious concept in an entertaining way. This movie has some very well-written dialogue and characters. Glenn Powell and Adria Arjona both give excellent performances in this film. I really enjoyed this film's clever and witty sense of humor. This film has some suspenseful moments that really put me on edge. I also really like the playful way this film tackles themes of identity and the idea of presenting yourself as someone you aren't. However, I don't think every aspect of this film works. The cinematography is a little too bland for me personally. I also felt this movie ended on a pretty generic note, but overall I liked this movie quite a bit and I'd recommend checking it out if you're interested. So yeah, those are some of the films by Richard Linklater. If you want to learn more about his work and his filmmaking process, I'd highly recommend watching the short documentary Linklater on Cinema and Time. I'd also recommend watching the documentary Richard Linklater Dream is Destiny, which is where I got a lot of the interview footage from. If you're curious, here's my personal ranking and ratings on each film I watched. If any of these movies sound interesting to you, check them out. Next video, I'm talking about the Abraham Lincoln assassination. Subscribe or something like that. Bye bye.